My name is Faye Lockwood, and I was the first person in my family to graduate college. Everyone smiled at my graduation ceremony, but those smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. My parents kept checking their watches. My sister barely looked up from her phone. Only my grandfather seemed genuinely proud, squeezing my hand with a strength that surprised me and whispering words that felt more like a warning than congratulations. I had no idea that my graduation wasn't a celebration for them. It was a starting gun. They had been waiting for this moment, planning for it, counting down to it. What they didn't know was that while they were making their plans, my grandfather and I had already made ours. And the Sunday they showed up with a moving truck to take everything would become the day they learned that entitlement and inheritance are not the same thing. The thing about being the first person in your family to graduate college is that everyone tells you how proud they are. They say it with their mouths. Their eyes tell a different story. I stood in my cap and gown that sunny May afternoon, diploma in hand, surrounded by relatives who clapped and cheered at all the right moments. My parents smiled for the cameras. My sister Sarah scrolled through her phone between photos. And Grandpa, frail, leaning heavily on his cane, squeezed my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "You did good, Faye. Better than we ever expected." It felt like both praise and warning. The celebration afterward happened at Grandpa's house. Everyone called it the family house, like ownership was a collective assumption rather than a legal fact. The large, old Victorian had been in our family for decades, passed down through Grandpa's side. I'd lived there for the past 4 years while attending the local university, taking care of Grandpa while my parents and Sarah stopped by when convenient. Which meant holidays, birthdays, and apparently my graduation. We gathered in the dining room, the table loaded with grocery store sheet cake and lukewarm casseroles. My aunt kept taking pictures. My uncle made jokes about me finally getting a real job. Everyone laughed and talked and acted like this was a normal family gathering. But something felt off. My mother sat at the head of the table, not Grandpa's usual spot, but close enough to command attention. She caught my eye across the room and smiled in that particular way that always preceded difficult conversations. "Now that you're done with school, Faye, we'll need to talk about next steps." Next steps. Like I was a project with phases. Sarah snorted into her wine glass. "Guess your free ride is over, huh?" More laughter. I smiled politely, but my stomach tightened. Grandpa, sitting quietly in his armchair by the window, wasn't laughing. He was watching them with an expression I'd seen before, the look he got when he was adding numbers in his head that didn't quite balance. The party wound down as the sun set. People hugged me, told me they were proud, reminded me to stay in touch. Sarah left without saying goodbye. My parents lingered, helping clean up in a way that felt performative, their movements too deliberate, their conversation too careful. When they finally left, the house fell silent except for the old grandfather clock in the hallway. I found Grandpa still in his armchair, staring out at the darkening yard. "Tired?" I asked, settling onto the ottoman beside him. "Not particularly." He turned to look at me, his pale blue eyes sharp despite his age. "Come sit with me properly. I want to ask you something." I moved to the couch. Grandpa took his time forming the question, the way he always did when something mattered. "If I wasn't here," he said finally, "would they let you stay?" The question hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to answer, to reassure him, but the words caught in my throat. Would they? My parents had their own house across town. Sarah had her apartment downtown. This place, this beautiful old house with its creaking floors and oversized windows, had been home to Grandpa his entire adult life. And for the past 4 years, it had been mine too. "I don't know," I admitted. Grandpa nodded like he'd already known my answer. "That's honest, at least." He was quiet for a long moment, his gnarled fingers tapping against the arm of his chair. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "I've been hearing things, Faye. Conversations people think I'm too deaf or too senile to follow. Plans being made without me. Your sister's name comes up a lot. And realtors." He paused. "They're not talking about helping me downsize." My chest felt tight. "Grandpa. They think waiting me out is the same as earning something. he continued, his voice steady but edged with something I rarely heard from him: anger. They think being family means they're owed what I've built.
I didn't know what to say.
Part of me wanted to defend them, to insist he was misunderstanding. But another part of me, the part that had noticed the forced smiles, the calculating glances, the casual comments about someday and eventually, knew he wasn't wrong. Why do you trust me? The question came out quieter than I intended. Grandpa's expression softened. Because you showed up when no one else did. Doctor appointments at 6 in the morning. Middle of the night emergencies. Refilling prescriptions. Remembering which medications can't be taken together. He reached over and patted my hand. You never asked for anything in return. That scares people who feel entitled. I just wanted to help. I know. That's exactly why I trust you. He settled back into his chair, looking suddenly exhausted. There are ways to make sure what I've built doesn't turn into a reward for bad behavior. Legal ways. Ways that protect people who deserve protecting. What are you suggesting? A trust, he said simply, watching my reaction. Something clear. Something that can't be undone by people who think tears and lawyers are the same as love. The word hung in the air between us.
Trust.
It sounded so formal, so final. So much like giving up on the idea that family could just work itself out. I don't want to be the reason the family falls apart, I whispered. Grandpa's laugh was dry. They'll call you that anyway, Faye. People protect themselves with stories. But you get to choose whether you'll let their story become the truth. I sat with that for a long time after Grandpa went to bed. The house settled around me, familiar creaks and sighs that I'd grown to love. In the dining room, my graduation photos sat propped against the wall, waiting to be framed. My parents had already taken copies. Sarah had asked when I was moving on with my life. I stared at my own smiling face in those pictures and wondered if any of them had actually been happy for me, or if they'd just been counting down to this moment, the moment when my usefulness as a caretaker expired and their plans could finally move forward. 3 weeks later, I accompanied Grandpa to a lawyer's office downtown. We didn't announce it, didn't make a production of it. Just a simple appointment on a Tuesday afternoon. I listened more than I spoke while Grandpa explained what he wanted. And I started to understand that sometimes protection doesn't look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like preparation. The lawyer's name was Catherine Reeves, and she had the kind of calm confidence that made complicated things feel manageable. Her office smelled like coffee and old books, and she took her time explaining everything in language that didn't require a law degree to understand. A trust is essentially a legal structure that holds assets for specific purposes, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. The person creating it, the grantor, in this case your grandfather, determines who benefits, when they benefit, and under what conditions. Grandpa nodded, his attention fixed on her with the same intensity he brought to crossword puzzles. What we're discussing, Catherine continued, is an irrevocable trust. Once executed, it can't be easily undone or modified. That's the strength of it, but also why we need to be very careful about the terms. I want safeguards, Grandpa said firmly. Mental competency clauses.
No unilateral transfers. No retroactive challenges.
I don't want anyone claiming I didn't know what I was doing. Catherine made notes. We'll include a contemporaneous medical evaluation. We'll also have multiple witnesses to the signing, including a notary. And I'll personally conduct a recorded interview with you establishing your understanding of the documents. What about me? I asked quietly. What's my role in this? That's an important question. Catherine turned to me. You wouldn't be the owner of these assets, Faye. You'd be a trustee, someone with a legal obligation to manage them according to the trust's terms. It's a position of responsibility, not ownership. Why structure it that way? I asked. Grandpa answered before Catherine could. So, no one can say you manipulated me. So no one can claim you're stealing what's yours. If they attack, I want facts defending you, not feelings. The precision of it struck me. This wasn't revenge. This was architecture. Over the next hour, Catherine walked us through scenarios, contingencies, and clauses I'd never considered. What happens if Grandpa needs nursing care? What happens if someone contests the trust? What happens if I'm unable to serve as trustee? Every question had an answer. Every answer had documentation. By the time we left her office, my head was spinning with information. You don't have to do this, Grandpa said as we drove home. It's not too late to change course. Do you want to change course?
No.
He stared out the window at the passing neighborhoods. But I want you to understand what you're signing up for. When this comes out, and it will come out, they're going to be angry. They're going to blame you. Let them, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Something changed after that appointment. Subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. My parents started visiting more often. Not dramatically more, they were too smart for that, but enough to be noticeable. Mom would stop by on her lunch break just to check in. Dad would come over on Saturdays to help with yard work that had been fine the week before. Sarah was less subtle. She started talking about renovations. When this place is eventually mine, I mean, ours, I'm definitely knocking out this wall, she said one Sunday, gesturing at the perfectly good wall between the kitchen and dining room. Open concept is huge right now. Eventually, I echoed. You know what I mean. She waved her hand dismissively. Way down the road. When Grandpa doesn't need all this space anymore. When Grandpa doesn't need it. Not if.
When?
Mom started asking careful questions about paperwork. Who was handling Grandpa's bills? Did he have everything organized? Had he updated any documents recently? Just making sure everything's in order, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know how complicated these things can get. The joke started around the same time. Little comments dressed up as humor, but designed to land like darts. Better watch the silverware, Sarah said loudly at dinner one night. Faye might pawn it for textbook money. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Grandpa. I noticed how they used laughter to soften cruelty, how jokes became plausible deniability. If I objected, I'd be too sensitive. If I stayed quiet, I accepted the narrative they were building. Grandpa's health declined gradually that summer. Nothing catastrophic, just the slow accumulation of age. Missed steps. Moments of confusion. Fatigue that sleep didn't fix. I increased my caregiving, adjusting medications, scheduling more frequent doctor visits, helping with tasks that had once been automatic for him. My family noticed, and they reframed it. She's isolating him. I overheard Sarah tell her mother on the phone. It's not healthy. He needs more social interaction. Social interaction they'd never provided until suddenly it was convenient to care. Catherine called me one afternoon in late July. I wanted to give you some advice, she said. When people sense a door closing, they don't knock. They ram it. Document everything. Dates of conversations. Medical decisions. Who was present. It might feel paranoid, but trust me. I started keeping a journal. Not a diary, a record. Clinical, factual, dated entries about Grandpa's care, family visits, and comments that felt like future ammunition. The trust was executed on a humid Wednesday in August. Grandpa signed while lucid, cracking jokes about finally being boring paperwork-wise. Catherine's office had arranged for 2 witnesses and a notary. The whole process took less than an hour. Walking out of that office, I felt relief wash over me. And underneath it, dread. For a while, nothing happened. The family seemed relaxed, even friendly. Mom brought over a casserole. Dad fixed a loose board on the porch. Sarah invited me to lunch, and actually showed up. I didn't trust any of it. This wasn't peace. This was the pause before the storm, the indrawn breath before the scream. One evening in late September, Dad cornered me in the kitchen while Grandpa napped upstairs. You haven't been making decisions you shouldn't, right? He asked casually, leaning against the counter. About Grandpa's affairs? I help him with what he needs help with, I said carefully. That's not what I asked. We stared at each other across the kitchen island. His eyes had that calculating look I'd seen before, the expression he got when negotiating business deals. I haven't done anything Grandpa hasn't asked me to do, I said. It was the truth. But it was also vague enough to protect what needed protecting. Dad studied me like I'd become a different species. You've changed. I graduated college. People usually change after that. He didn't smile. He pushed off the counter and headed for the door, pausing in the doorway. Just remember, Faye. Family looks out for each other. After he left, I pulled out the plain folder from the drawer in Grandpa's study. The trust documents inside were unremarkable, just paper and ink and legal language. But they represented something Catherine had called a line of defense drawn in permanent marker. Outside, I could hear Sarah's laugh carrying through the window. Mom was saying something about holiday plans. They had no idea the ground had already shifted beneath them.
And part of me felt guilty about that.
But a larger part of me remembered Grandpa's question. Would they let you stay? The answer was no. It had always been no. I slid the folder back into the drawer and locked it. I heard Mom on the phone in mid-October, her voice carrying through the old house's thin walls. She didn't know I was home. I'd come back from the pharmacy earlier than expected, entering quietly through the side door. After graduation was perfect timing, she was saying. Faye will be busy figuring herself out, deciding on career moves. She won't be able to focus on all this. All this. Meaning Grandpa. Meaning the house. Meaning me. I stood frozen in the hallway, holding a bag of prescriptions. We're thinking Sunday, Mom continued. The whole family there.
Clean. Organized.
By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll already be done. I moved silently to my room and shut the door. My hands were shaking as I set down the medications. Graduation hadn't been a celebration for them. It had been a countdown. The timeline they'd been waiting for had arrived. The next few weeks felt like watching a carefully choreographed performance from backstage. My family started framing their actions as concern, as help, as reasonable solutions to problems they'd invented. Have you thought about assisted living for Grandpa? Dad asked during dinner. Just for his safety. These stairs are dangerous. I could help organize his finances, Mom offered. Take that burden off you, so you can focus on your future. We should probably start decluttering, Sarah said, eyeing the antique furniture like it was already hers. I know a great estate sale company. Everything was positioned as doing me a favor, helping me,
protecting Grandpa.
But underneath the helpful language was a current of inevitability, like they were narrating events that had already been decided. I started noticing the gaslighting. Sarah told our aunt I was confused about the ownership situation. My parents repeated it to other relatives. Said it enough times that it started to sound official, like there had been a family meeting I'd missed where my confusion was diagnosed and confirmed. I began doubting whether anyone would believe me when the time came. Grandpa pushed back once. Only once. We were all gathered for Sunday dinner. This was before the Sunday, the one Mom had mentioned on the phone, and Sarah made a comment about dividing up rooms after Grandpa moved somewhere more manageable. Grandpa set down his fork with enough force that the plate rattled. This house is not up for discussion, he said clearly. Not now. Not later. Not ever. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Sarah's smile froze. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance I'd learned to interpret. He's being difficult. Dad, Mom said gently, using her most patient voice. We're just trying to plan ahead. For your well-being. My well-being is fine. Grandpa's voice was steel wrapped in age. What concerns me is everyone else's sudden interest in planning my future without asking what I want. Silence fell over the table. I pushed food around my plate, afraid to look up, afraid to become the focus of whatever was building in the air. Later that night, after everyone left, Mom pulled me aside at the door. He's not thinking clearly anymore, she said softly, sympathetically. You see that, right? How confused he's getting. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her Grandpa was sharper than all of them combined. But I just nodded, playing the role they expected. They needed to believe I was manageable. The isolation started creeping in. Relatives stopped returning my calls. Friends from college heard distorted versions of the story, that I was living rent-free off my grandfather, that I was keeping him from family, that I was taking advantage of an elderly man. I felt the weight of being outnumbered. But I kept my journal, dated and detailed, a paper trail of truth for when the lies came due. Sarah called me on a Tuesday in early November. Her voice was cheerful, casual. Hey, so we're all coming by Sunday. Around noon. To straighten things out. Straighten things out. Like the house was messy. Like our family was a room that needed organizing. What things? I asked. Oh, living arrangements. Responsibilities. Just family stuff. She laughed lightly. Don't stress about it. We just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. After she hung up, I sat on my bed and stared at my phone. Sunday. They'd picked their moment. I called Catherine the next morning. Let me review everything one more time, she said calmly. Bring any documentation you have. Let's make sure there are no gaps. Her office was warm and familiar now, less intimidating than that first visit. She spread the trust documents across her desk, checking dates, signatures, clauses. Her finger moved down pages with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew exactly what to look for. This is airtight, she said finally. Mental competency evaluation on file. Multiple witnesses. Clear language. Medical records supporting his lucidity. They can challenge it, but they won't win. They're coming Sunday, I said. Catherine looked at me over her reading glasses. Then let them walk into it. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt exhausted. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I could warn them, I said quietly. Call my mom. Tell her not to come. Avoid the whole confrontation. You could, Catherine agreed. Do you think they warned your grandfather before planning to push him out of his own home? The answer sat heavy between us. That night, I considered texting Sarah, calling my parents, explaining the situation before Sunday arrived. Every instinct I had told me to smooth things over, to find a compromise, to be the peacemaker I'd always been. But Grandpa's words kept echoing. They didn't warn me. Saturday night, the house was quiet. Grandpa went to bed early, tired from a day that had required more energy than he had. I sat at the kitchen table, the trust folder in front of me, rehearsing nothing because the truth wouldn't need rehearsal. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11. Midnight. 1 in the morning. I finally went to bed around 2, but didn't sleep much. Every sound seemed amplified. The house settling, branches scraping windows, my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. I made coffee, fed the cat, straightened the living room not because it needed it, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Grandpa came downstairs around 10, moving slowly. They're coming today, I said. I know. It's going to be bad. I know that too. He settled into his armchair with a soft grunt. But sometimes bad is necessary. At 11:30, I placed the folder on the coffee table. Simple, unassuming, just paper in a manila folder. At 11:40, I heard car doors slamming outside. At 11:45, the doorbell rang. I took a breath and opened the door. They arrived like an invading force, coordinated, confident, rehearsed. Mom came in first, arms spread for a hug. I didn't return. Dad followed with his taking charge posture. Sarah brought up the rear, already looking around the house like she was measuring for furniture. Behind them, visible through the open door, a rented moving truck idled at the curb. Good morning. Mom's voice was aggressively cheerful. How is everyone? Did you have breakfast? We brought bagels. We're fine, I said, not moving from the doorway. Well, let's sit down. Dad was already heading for the living room, assuming control of space that wasn't his. We have some things to discuss. Grandpa was already seated in his armchair, watching them file in with an expression I couldn't quite read. They arranged themselves on the couch like a tribunal, Mom in the middle, Dad and Sarah flanking her. I remained standing. Mom folded her hands in her lap, the picture of calm reason. Faye, honey, we've been thinking a lot about your situation. About what's best for everyone. My situation, I repeated flatly. You've done wonderfully taking care of Dad these past few years, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. But we think it's time for you to focus on your own life now. Your career. Your future. We've made arrangements, Dad added. His voice had that boardroom authority, the tone that expected compliance. For Dad's care going forward. Professional care. and for the property itself. Sarah leaned forward, her expression sympathetic in a way that looked practiced. You'll need to pack your things today, Faye. We've brought help. She gestured toward the window, toward the truck. It's not personal. It's just time. The words landed in the quiet room like stones in still water. Pack my things, I said. We know it's sudden, Mom said gently. But we've thought this through carefully. You'll stay with us temporarily while you figure out your next steps. Dad's moving to a lovely facility we've found. And the house. Well, we'll handle the house. You'll handle it, I repeated. Sarah and I will take over the estate management, Dad said. He pulled papers from his briefcase, documents I'd never seen. Everything's been arranged with the estate attorney. Clean transfer of responsibility. They spoke with such certainty, such confidence, as if reality bent to their expectations, as if planning and assumption were the same as authority.
I looked at Grandpa.
He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He was watching them with something between pity and disgust. Do you have anything to say? I asked him quietly. Let them finish, he said. Sarah stood, already moving toward the hallway. I'll start upstairs. Faye, do you need boxes, or did you prepare some? Sit down, I said. Something in my voice stopped her. She turned, irritation flickering across her face. Excuse me? Sit down. I walked to the coffee table and picked up the manila folder. Before you start packing anything, you need to see something. I opened it slowly, deliberately. The trust documents were pristine, organized with colored tabs Catherine had added. I spread them across the coffee table, like I was dealing cards. What is this? Mom asked, leaning forward. A trust, I said simply. Established 6 months ago. Legally executed. Properly witnessed. Dad reached for the papers, his brow furrowing. He read the first page, then the second. His expression shifted from confusion to comprehension to something harder. This isn't possible, he said. It's extremely possible. It's done. Sarah grabbed the documents from Dad's hands, scanning them quickly. Her face went pale. When did you? How did you? Grandpa did this, I interrupted. With full legal counsel, while completely lucid, with medical evaluation confirming his mental capacity. Dad. Mom turned to Grandpa, her voice taking on a pleading quality. You couldn't have understood what you were signing. You were confused. Faye must have. Stop. Grandpa's voice cut through the room like a blade. He leaned forward in his chair, his pale blue eyes burning with an intensity I'd rarely seen. I understood exactly what I was signing. Every clause. Every condition. Every implication. But why? Sarah's voice cracked. We're your family.
Yes.
You are. Grandpa's words were measured, deliberate. You're my daughter, who visits twice a month unless she wants something. My son-in-law who checks his watch during every conversation. My granddaughter, who spent 4 years planning what to do with my house after I'm dead. That's not fair, Mom whispered. Isn't it? Grandpa gestured at the papers on the table. I did this because you thought waiting made you owners. Because you believed entitlement and inheritance were the same thing. Because you planned my future without once asking what I wanted. She manipulated you. Sarah pointed at me, her voice rising. Can't you see that? She's been isolating you, controlling what you hear, what you think. She's been keeping me alive, Grandpa said quietly. She's been showing up at 6 in the morning for doctor appointments, organizing medications, cooking meals, sitting with me when I couldn't sleep. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't assume anything. She just helped. We would have helped. Mom's voice broke.
No.
Grandpa's response was absolute. You would have visited when convenient. You would have made decisions that benefited you. You would have put me in a facility and sold this house before I was cold in the ground. He pointed at the window at the moving truck. You brought proof with you. Silence fell like a curtain. Dad was rereading the trust documents, his lawyer mind clearly working through implications. Sarah had gone very still, her earlier confidence shattered. Mom looked like she was trying to cry, but couldn't quite manage it. This is fraud, Dad said finally, his voice hard. Undue influence. We'll challenge it. We'll take this to court, and we'll prove she coerced you. Try, Grandpa said simply.
Dad, please.
Mom stood, moving toward him. We can fix this. We can undo whatever she's convinced you to do. We're your family. We love you.
Then you should have shown me, Grandpa said.
Instead of showing me spreadsheets and floor plans and ambition. Sarah grabbed her purse. This isn't over. We're getting lawyers. Real lawyers. And we're going to prove what she did. The trust was prepared by Catherine Reeves, I said calmly. You're welcome to look her up. She's one of the top estate attorneys in the state. Dad's face went even harder at the name. He would know Catherine's reputation. He would know what fighting her would cost. You planned this, he said, looking at me like I'd become something foreign. You planned this whole thing. No, I said. Grandpa planned this. I just helped him protect what was his. They left in stages. Sarah first, storming out without another word. Dad gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. Mom lingered the longest, looking between Grandpa and me like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. You're making a mistake, she said finally. Both of you. The only mistake I made, Grandpa said, was waiting this long to fix it. The door closed behind them with a heavy finality. Through the window, I watched them climb into their cars. The moving truck pulled away. One by one, the vehicles disappeared down the street. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly weak. The folder was still spread across the coffee table, evidence of a war that had just become public. Grandpa sat heavily in his armchair. He looked exhausted, but underneath the exhaustion was something else. Relief, maybe. Or vindication. They're going to fight this, I said quietly. I know. It's going to get uglier. I know that too. He reached over and squeezed my hand. But it needed to happen. They needed to know. I thought about the moving truck, about their certainty, about how they'd walked in here expecting compliance and walked out facing consequences. Do you think they'll ever forgive us? I asked. Grandpa was quiet for a long moment. People don't forgive those who remind them of who they really are, he said finally. But that's not your burden to carry. That night, I locked the door, really locked it, including the deadbolt and chain. The house felt different somehow. Still familiar, still home.
But also fortified now.
Protected. Grandpa had gone to bed early, worn out from the confrontation. I sat at the kitchen table with my journal, documenting everything that had happened. Every word spoken. Every expression. Every threat made. Because I knew Catherine was right. This was just the beginning. They didn't accept no. They never had. And tomorrow, they'd start learning how to fight back. The lawyer letter arrived on Thursday. Not in the mail, hand-delivered by a process server who rang the doorbell at 7 in the morning and made me sign for it. I stood in the doorway in my pajamas, holding an envelope that felt heavier than paper should feel. Faye. Grandpa called from upstairs. Who was that? Nobody, I called back. Go back to sleep. I waited until I heard his door close before I opened the envelope. Notice of legal challenge. Undue influence. Cognitive impairment. Coercion and exploitation of vulnerable adult. The words blurred together. They were accusing me of isolating Grandpa, of manipulating him when he was weak, of exploiting cognitive decline that didn't exist. The language was aggressive, designed to paint me as a predator and Grandpa as a victim who needed saving. From me. I called Catherine before 8. She answered on the second ring, already sounding awake and alert. I've been expecting this, she said after I read her the relevant sections. It's standard intimidation. They're trying to scare you into backing down. It's working, I admitted.
Don't let it.
Bring me the letter. We'll respond appropriately. Grandpa found me at the kitchen table an hour later, the letter spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. They sent it, I said unnecessarily. He picked it up, reading slowly. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, I realized, but from anger. I should have dealt with this sooner, he said quietly, setting the letter down. I've dragged you into something ugly. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. Did you choose legal battles and character assassination? I thought about it honestly.
No.
But I chose you. The rest comes with it. He sat heavily in the chair across from me. For the first time since this started, he looked truly old. Not just elderly, defeated. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be. They'd be doing this whether you protected things or not. At least this way, there's something left to protect. The phone calls started that afternoon. Extended relatives I barely knew, suddenly deeply concerned about the situation. Aunt Linda called, crying, saying she'd heard such terrible things. Uncle Mark left a voicemail about getting help before it was too late. Cousin Jennifer texted that she was praying for clarity. None of them called to hear my side. They called because my mother had gotten to them first, spinning a narrative where I was the villain and they were the helpless family watching tragedy unfold. My phone stopped ringing by evening. Not because people stopped calling, because I stopped answering. Sarah escalated it publicly. She posted on social media about being heartbroken over family betrayal and fighting for my grandfather's well-being. The post was vague enough to avoid specifics, but damning enough to shape opinion. People who'd known me my whole life commented with sympathy for her.
For them.
Nobody asked what I had to say. The second letter came a week later. This one wasn't just threatening legal action, it announced it. They'd filed for a medical review of Grandpa's competency at the time the trust was created. They wanted his medical records from the past 5 years. They wanted to depose his doctors. They wanted proof he'd been manipulated. Catherine scheduled an emergency meeting. They're weaponizing his medical history, she explained, spreading documents across her conference table. Every small incident, confusion, fatigue, missed appointments, they'll frame as evidence of diminished capacity. But he was lucid, I said. You evaluated him yourself. I did. And my evaluation is solid. But they'll try to discredit it. They'll claim I was biased, that you influenced the process, that I failed to identify signs of impairment. She looked at me seriously. This is going to be expensive and exhausting. They're counting on you giving up. What if I did? The words came out before I could stop them. What if I just walked away? Would that end it? Probably. They'd get what they want. Grandpa would lose control of his own assets. And you'd spend the rest of your life wondering if you abandoned someone who needed you. Grandpa had been quiet throughout the meeting. Now he spoke up, his voice steady despite everything. Don't you dare give up because of me, he said. They're betting on your kindness being weakness. Prove them wrong. We shifted strategy. Catherine advised proactive defense, documenting every interaction with my family, filing countersuits for harassment, locking down assets even further. I went from defending to actively protecting, gathering evidence like I was building a case instead of living a life. The journal I'd been keeping became crucial. Dates of visits, quotes from conversations, witnesses to incidents. Everything that seemed paranoid months ago now seemed prescient. Sarah showed up unannounced 2 weeks later. I found her on the porch when I came back from the pharmacy, sitting on the steps like we were still sisters who could just talk. Can we talk? She asked. Her eyes were red. She looked exhausted. Against my better judgment, I sat down beside her. I didn't think it would go this far, she said quietly. I thought you'd just give up the house.
Move on.
Let us handle things. Handle things, I repeated. You mean sell everything Grandpa built so you could buy a condo downtown? That's not fair. Isn't it? You brought a moving truck, Sarah, to evict your grandfather from his own home. She was quiet for a long moment. Mom and Dad are furious. They've hired a firm that specializes in estate disputes. They're talking about taking this as far as it needs to go. Is that a threat? It's a warning. She looked at me, and for a second I saw something that might have been genuine concern. If this drags on, people will get hurt. Reputations, relationships, money, everything. Then tell them to drop it. You know they won't. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. I'm trying to help you, Faye. I'm trying to give you a way out before this gets worse. After she left, I realized what she'd been doing. Not warning, threatening. Not helping, pressuring. Every word had been calculated to make me doubt, to make me feel responsible for the destruction they were causing. I called Catherine immediately. Document the conversation, she said. Date, time, what was said. They're building a pattern of harassment. The pattern became clearer when the wellness check happened. I came home from grocery shopping to find 2 police officers on the porch and a social worker inside talking to Grandpa. My heart stopped. What's happening? I asked, dropping the bags. We received a call, one officer explained. Concerns about a vulnerable adult. We're required to investigate. Who called? He couldn't tell me. But I knew. The social worker asked Grandpa invasive questions. Was he being fed properly? Did he feel safe? Was anyone controlling his finances? Could he make his own medical decisions? Grandpa answered each question with increasing fury. Yes, he was fed. Yes, he felt safe. No, nobody was controlling him. Yes, he was perfectly capable of making his own damn decisions. The officers were professional, but apologetic. The social worker seemed uncomfortable. They could see this was manufactured concern, not genuine crisis. But the damage was done. Grandpa was humiliated.
Exhausted.
Sitting in his own living room being interrogated by strangers because his own children had weaponized the system meant to protect vulnerable people. After they left, he sat at the kitchen table and gripped the edge with white knuckles. Now they've shown who they are, he said quietly. And I realized this wasn't about the house anymore. Maybe it never had been. This was about legacy, about what we leave behind, about whether the people who hurt us get to write the final story. I'm not backing down, I said. Good, Grandpa replied. Neither am I. The petition for emergency guardianship arrived in December, filed with enough urgency that a hearing was scheduled within 2 weeks. I read the document 3 times, each pass making my hands shake harder. They were trying to take him away from me, not physically, legally. They wanted a judge to declare Grandpa incapable of managing his own affairs and appoint them as guardians, which would give them control over his medical decisions, his finances, and where he lived. The trust would be irrelevant if they succeeded. A guardian could challenge it, potentially unravel it, argue that it was created during a period of incompetence. This was the nuclear option. They can't actually do this, I said to Catherine during our emergency meeting.
He's fine.
He's completely lucid. They don't need him to be incompetent, Catherine explained grimly. They just need to create enough doubt. Enough questions. Enough paperwork that suggests there might be a problem. This will destroy him. I know. She pulled out her own files. But we have something they don't. We have Dr. Morrison. Dr. Morrison had been Grandpa's physician for 15 years. He was thorough, respected, and unafraid to call out obvious manipulation. Catherine had already contacted him about submitting a statement. He's willing to testify? I asked. More than willing. He's angry. They tried to get him to say your grandfather was impaired. He refused. The days leading up to the hearing were brutal. My family launched a coordinated campaign, painting me as the problem. They sent concerned emails to Grandpa's friends. They called his former colleagues. They even contacted the church he'd attended for 40 years. The message was consistent. Faye has isolated him. Faye is making decisions he can't understand. Faye is the reason you can't see him. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when you said something enough times with enough conviction. Grandpa deteriorated. Not mentally, emotionally. The stress was killing him slowly, visibly. He stopped sleeping well. Lost weight. Sat for hours staring out the window at nothing. I raised them, he said one night, his voice breaking. I changed diapers. Paid for weddings. Helped with down payments. And they're trying to erase me. They won't succeed. Won't they? He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. They have money. They have lawyers. They have a narrative people want to believe, that poor old man being controlled by his opportunistic granddaughter. We have the truth. Since when has truth been enough? I didn't have an answer for that. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in mid-December. Catherine prepped me for hours. What to say, what not to say, how to sit, how to respond. She treated it like combat preparation because that's what it was. They're going to attack you personally, she warned. Your age. Your dependence on your grandfather. Your education being funded by him. They'll make it sound like manipulation instead of love. What do I say? The truth.
Clearly.
Without emotion. Let them get angry. Let them overreach. We stay calm and factual. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic than TV had prepared me for. My parents sat on one side with their lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who looked expensive. Sarah sat behind them, refusing to make eye contact with me. Grandpa sat beside me, dressed in his best suit, his hands folded in his lap. He looked fragile but determined. Their lawyer went first, laying out a case built on implication and concern. He showed records of doctor visits Grandpa had missed, not mentioning that he'd rescheduled them appropriately. He referenced confusion, not mentioning it was normal age-related momentary lapses. He painted a picture of decline that existed only on paper. "We're not questioning Mr. Lockwood's love for his granddaughter," the lawyer said smoothly. "We're questioning whether he's capable of making complex legal decisions in his current state." Catherine stood. "Your Honor, the petitioners are attempting to strip my client of his fundamental rights based on selective interpretation of normal aging. Mr. Lockwood is not incapacitated. He's elderly. There's a difference." "The court would like to hear from Mr. Lockwood," the judge said. Grandpa stood slowly. Catherine had advised against him speaking, worried the stress would affect his clarity. But he'd insisted. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady. "I'm 87 years old. I forget names sometimes. I move slowly. I get tired easily. These are facts of age, not evidence of incompetence." The judge nodded. "Continue." "My daughter and son-in-law filed this petition because I didn't give them what they wanted. I created a trust that protects my assets from being immediately liquidated after my death. I chose a trustee I believe will honor my wishes. Those are rational decisions made by a competent person. They're claiming your granddaughter influenced those decisions. My granddaughter helped me execute decisions I'd already made." Grandpa's voice strengthened. "She didn't plant ideas in my head. She validated what I'd been thinking for years, that leaving everything to people who see it as a payday would be a betrayal of everything I built." Sarah made a sound behind me. The lawyer touched her arm. "Why did you choose Faye?" the judge asked. "Because she showed up." Grandpa's answer was simple, devastating. "When I needed surgery, she took time off school. When I had pneumonia, she slept on the floor of my hospital room. When I couldn't remember my medications, she organized them without being asked. She didn't do it for inheritance. She did it because she loved me." He turned to look at my parents. "They did it for Christmas dinners and birthday calls. Love and obligation aren't the same thing." The silence that followed was heavy. The judge made notes. The lawyer shuffled papers uncomfortably. Then Catherine called Dr. Morrison. He entered wearing his white coat, looking exactly like what he was, a respected physician with decades of experience. He was sworn in and seated. "Dr. Morrison, in your professional opinion, does Mr. Lockwood have the mental capacity to make legal and financial decisions?" Catherine asked. "Absolutely." His answer was unequivocal. "I evaluated him thoroughly at the time the trust was created. His cognition was intact. His understanding was clear. He exhibited no signs of undue influence or manipulation. The petitioners suggest he was experiencing cognitive decline. Every elderly person experiences some cognitive changes. Mr. Lockwood's are well within normal parameters for his age. He has moments of forgetfulness, as we all do, but his judgment, reasoning, and decision-making capacity are sound." Their lawyer stood. "Doctor, isn't it possible you missed signs of manipulation? That your relationship with the patient made you less objective?" Dr. Morrison's expression hardened. "I've been a physician for 35 years. I know the difference between a patient making autonomous decisions and a patient being coerced. Mr. Lockwood was not coerced." "How can you be certain?" "Because I asked him, alone, without his granddaughter present. I asked him directly if he felt pressured. He said no. I believed him then. I believe him now." The lawyer tried several more angles, but Dr. Morrison didn't budge. He was a brick wall of professional credibility. Sarah's lawyer called her to speak. She walked to the stand looking composed, but I could see the tremor in her hands. Ms. Lockwood, what are your concerns about your grandfather's well-being? Faye has isolated him, Sarah said, her voice breaking strategically. He used to see family regularly. Now we're kept away. We're worried he doesn't understand what he signed. We just want to protect him. From what? The judge asked. Sarah hesitated. From being taken advantage of. By his granddaughter, who's been his primary caregiver for 4 years? Yes. The judge looked at Sarah for a long moment. Ms. Lockwood, is it possible you're concerned about your inheritance rather than your grandfather's welfare? Sarah's face flushed. We're not. It's not about money. Then why did you bring a moving truck to his home on the same day you informed him he needed to leave? The courtroom went silent. Somehow the judge had seen the evidence we'd submitted. Photos of a truck, statements from neighbors, the timeline of events. Sarah's lawyer objected, called it irrelevant. The judge overruled him. I'm going to be very clear, the judge said. This petition reeks of financial motivation, disguised as concern. Mr. Lockwood has demonstrated full capacity. His physician confirms it. His attorney confirms it. And frankly, his testimony was more coherent than some people half his age. She looked at my parents. Emergency guardianship is designed to protect vulnerable adults from genuine harm. It is not a tool to override estate planning you don't like. Petition denied. The gavel came down. Grandpa exhaled beside me, a sound that contained years of held breath. We left the courthouse in silence. In the parking lot, my mother tried to approach. Grandpa held up his hand. No, he said simply. Dad, please. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You tried to take away my right to make my own decisions. There's nothing left to say. We drove home. Grandpa stared out the window the entire way. When we pulled into the driveway, he finally spoke. I need to make sure this never happens again. What do you mean? I need to close every door, every loophole, every possible way they can challenge this after I'm gone. That night, he called Catherine. They talked for over an hour while I sat in the kitchen, listening to one-sided conversation about addendums and irrevocable clauses and statements of intent. When he hung up, he looked exhausted but resolved. Tomorrow we go back to her office, he said, and we make this bulletproof. I wanted to ask if it was worth it, the stress, the heartbreak, the family destruction. But I already knew his answer. Some doors need to be closed permanently. The discovery process was Catherine's idea. If they wanted to investigate us, she argued, we had every right to investigate them. She filed subpoenas for their financial records, email correspondence, and text messages related to Grandpa's estate. What came back was worse than I'd imagined. Look at this, Catherine said, spreading printouts across her conference table. Emails between your sister and a real estate agent. Dated 8 months before your graduation. I read them with growing nausea. Sarah discussing property values. Asking about potential sale prices. Calculating her share of a house she didn't own. And this. Catherine slid over another document. A spreadsheet your father created. Income projections based on liquidating your grandfather's assets within 6 months of his death. They'd been planning this for over a year. Before I graduated. Before Grandpa showed any signs of needing increased care. They'd been counting him dead and dividing the spoils while he was still alive. There's more, Catherine said quietly. Text messages between your mother and sister. They're discussing how to handle you, how to make you seem unstable if you resisted. I felt sick. They were planning to discredit me? Extensively. They had a whole narrative prepared. Emotional instability. Financial desperation. Unhealthy attachment to your grandfather. They were building a story before they needed it. What do we do with this? We file it with the court. We make sure every judge, every lawyer, every family member who's been listening to their version sees the evidence. We let the truth do the damage. Their lawyer withdrew within a week. Not publicly, not dramatically, just a quiet notice that he no longer represented them. Word spread in legal circles. Fighting a trust with this much documentation, this much evidence of bad faith, was career damaging. They tried to find other representation. Firm after firm declined. Nobody wanted to take a case where the clients had been caught planning inheritance distribution while the person was still alive. Extended family started calling. Not to yell, to apologize. Aunt Linda sent a long email explaining she'd only heard one side. Uncle Mark left a voicemail saying he should have asked more questions. Cousin Jennifer texted that she felt manipulated. The apologies felt hollow. Too late.
Too convenient.
They believed the worst of me without question, and now they wanted forgiveness because evidence proved them wrong. I didn't respond to any of them. My parents made one last attempt at settlement. They proposed dropping all legal action in exchange for a cash payout, essentially asking Grandpa to buy their silence. Grandpa refused without hesitation. "I'm not paying people to stop attacking me," he said. They made their choices. Now they live with them. The social consequences happened quietly.
No viral moment.
No public scandal. Just slow, steady erosion of reputation. Invitations to family events went unanswered. Holiday plans excluded them. Relatives who'd known them for decades started viewing them differently. Sarah posted once more on social media, a long explanation about misunderstandings and legal complexities. The comments were brutal. People who'd sympathized before now asked pointed questions. Why the moving truck? Why the guardianship attempt? Why the spreadsheets? She deleted the post within hours. Her accounts went private. Mom and Dad retreated into silence. No more calls. No more letters. No more surprise visits. They withdrew completely, not in peace, but in defeat. Sarah showed up one last time. Late evening. Alone. I found her sitting in her car in the driveway, not getting out, just sitting. I walked out to her window. She rolled it down. "I'm not here to fight," she said immediately. "Then why are you here?" I wanted to say. She stopped, searching for words. "You could end this. You could give them something. Make peace." "I'm not the one who started a war, Sarah. But you could end it." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She'd lost weight. Dark circles under her eyes. The confident, cruel person who'd brought a moving truck was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and lost. "You already ended it," I said quietly. "You ended it when you planned to sell Grandpa's house before he died. You ended it when you filed for guardianship. You ended it every time you chose money over relationships. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "What was it supposed to be like?" "You show up with a truck, we pack quietly, and you get to pretend you didn't just evict your grandfather." She didn't answer. After a long moment, she rolled up the window and drove away. I never saw her again. Grandpa's health stabilized through winter. Without the constant stress of legal battles and family attacks, he improved slightly. Not dramatically, he was still elderly, still tired easily, but the weight lifted from his shoulders. He smiled more, slept better, started working on a woodworking project in the garage. "I'm at peace," he told me one evening. "Whatever happens next, I know I did the right thing." The lawsuit was officially withdrawn in February.
No apology. No explanation.
Just a legal notice that all claims were dismissed with prejudice. It was over. Except it wasn't, not really. The family was fractured beyond repair. Relationships destroyed. Trust obliterated. My parents had lost not just the house but their reputations, their relationships with extended family, and their daughter. Sarah had lost whatever future she'd imagined for herself in that house. And I'd lost the family I'd once believed loved me unconditionally. But Grandpa was safe. The house was protected. The truth had won, even if the victory tasted bitter. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" I asked Grandpa one night. "Understand what?" "That this wasn't about the house.
It was about respect.
About being valued as a person instead of an inheritance." Grandpa was quiet for a long time. "No," he said finally. "People who measure love in assets never understand relationships measured in presence." Spring came slowly. The garden needed work. The house needed repairs. Life needed rebuilding. But we rebuilt it together.
Carefully. Peacefully.
Without the shadow of people who'd tried to take it all away. Summer arrived with warm breezes and late sunsets. Grandpa spent more time in the garden, moving slowly but contentedly. I started a new job, remote work that let me stay close to home. We fell into a rhythm that felt less like recovery and more like living. The legal documents were filed away. The trust functioned exactly as intended, quiet, efficient, requiring no attention because it had been built correctly from the start. My parents moved to Arizona in July. I heard about it through Aunt Linda, who'd started calling occasionally with carefully neutral updates. They'd sold their house, downsized, relocated somewhere they could start fresh. Running away from consequences dressed up as new beginnings. Sarah got engaged to someone I'd never met. The announcement came through social media, her privacy settings relaxed enough for mutual acquaintances to see but not enough for direct viewing. I looked at the pictures once, her smiling on a beach somewhere, ring glinting in the sunset. She looked happy. Or, at least, she looked like someone performing happiness. I deleted the browser tab and didn't look again. Grandpa's health declined gently through autumn. Not the dramatic collapse I'd feared, just the natural unwinding of a long life well lived. He needed more help with stairs. Tired earlier in the evenings. Spent more time reminiscing than planning. One October night, we sat on the porch, watching the leaves turn. He'd been quiet for a while, the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. "I've been thinking about legacy," he said finally. "Good thoughts or heavy thoughts?" "Both." He smiled slightly. "I used to think legacy was about what you left behind.
Property. Money.
Things people could hold and divide and argue over. And now I think legacy is about what you protected, what you refused to compromise, who you chose to trust when trust was the most valuable thing you had." He looked at me. "You didn't protect the house, Faye. You protected the truth. The truth that family isn't always worth preserving. The truth that some things matter more than keeping peace. Some doors need closing. Some relationships aren't worth the cost of maintaining them." I thought about that for a long time. About my parents in Arizona, building new lives with people who didn't know what they'd done. About Sarah with her new fiancé, probably telling edited versions of family history. About extended relatives who'd believed lies without question. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "How it ended?" "I regret that it was necessary," Grandpa said carefully. "But I don't regret the ending itself. They showed me who they were. I just finally believed them." November brought the first snow. Grandpa caught a cold that turned into something more serious. The doctor visits increased. The medications adjusted. I knew what was coming, even if I didn't want to admit it. "I'm ready," Grandpa told me one night after a particularly difficult day. "I've made my peace." "I'm not ready." "You will be." He squeezed my hand with fingers that felt frail, but still certain. "You're stronger than you think. You proved that already." He passed quietly in his sleep on a Tuesday morning in late November. No drama. No emergency. Just a peaceful transition from one state to another. I found him when I brought morning coffee. He looked comfortable, almost relieved. I sat with him for a long time before calling anyone. The will was read the following week. Catherine handled it with her usual efficiency. No surprises, just clarity. The house remained in trust. Charitable donations to causes Grandpa had supported quietly for years. Small bequests to extended family who'd stayed loyal. Nothing for my parents. Nothing for Sarah. Not out of spite. Just absence. They weren't mentioned at all, as if they'd already been erased from a story before death made it official. Some attended the funeral. Most didn't. My parents sent flowers but didn't come. Sarah didn't acknowledge it at all. Aunt Linda came, bringing her whole family. Uncle Mark flew in from Seattle. Cousin Jennifer helped organize the reception. "I'm sorry I believed them," Linda told me quietly at the service. "I should have known better." "You believed what they told you. That's what people do."
Still, I'm sorry.
I accepted the apology because holding on to anger would only poison me. But I didn't forget the lesson. People believe the stories that confirm their assumptions. Truth requires evidence. Faith in someone's character isn't free. It's earned or broken. Moving forward felt strange. The house was mine to manage now, legally and practically. Not mine to own. The trust was clear about that, but mine to steward.
To maintain.
To protect the way Grandpa had protected it. I repainted the kitchen that winter, fixed the loose step on the porch, replaced the ancient refrigerator. Small acts of care that felt like honoring memory without being trapped by it. Catherine called in January to check in. "How are you managing?" she asked. "Honestly, better than I expected." I looked around the kitchen where I'd had so many conversations with Grandpa. He set everything up so clearly that there's nothing to question. Nothing to fight about. Just responsibilities to fulfill. That was his gift to you. Clarity instead of chaos. I used to think the gift was the house. What do you think now? I think the gift was showing me that some battles are worth fighting. That protecting something doesn't make you cruel, even when people call it that. After we hung up, I pulled out the folder from the drawer, the one that had started everything. The trust documents were pristine, organized, exactly as we'd left them. Not a weapon anymore. Just a record. Evidence of decisions made carefully by someone who'd loved enough to protect rather than appease. I locked the folder away again and looked around the house. My phone buzzed. A message from Aunt Linda about dinner plans. A notification about a bill payment. Normal life continuing after extraordinary circumstances. I thought about Grandpa's last words to me. "You protected the truth." They changed everything after I graduated. Changed their approach, their tactics, their stories about who I was and what I'd done. Changed the narrative so many times I'd almost lost track of reality. But they couldn't change the one thing that mattered. They couldn't change what Grandpa and I had already done. The protection we'd built. The trust we'd executed. The line we'd drawn that said some things are worth defending, some relationships aren't worth the cost, and some doors need to close permanently. I turned off the kitchen light and headed upstairs. Tomorrow I'd work on the garden, repair the fence, maybe start sorting through Grandpa's workshop. But tonight, I just locked the door, set the alarm, and felt grateful for a house that still felt like home. A home earned not through inheritance, but through presence. Through showing up. Through loving someone enough to help them protect what mattered. They'd tried to take everything. Instead, they'd lost it all. And I'd learned the most important lesson Grandpa could teach. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you refuse to let be destroyed. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. Somewhere in the walls, in the foundation, in the very structure of this place, Grandpa's decisions held firm. Protecting me the way I'd once protected him. That was the real inheritance. And it was worth every battle it took to keep it. If your family expected you to sacrifice everything without asking what you wanted in return, would you have the strength to draw the line, even if it meant losing them forever? If this story made you think about what protection really means, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family, loyalty, and the lines we draw when love isn't enough.